Thank you. Konnichiwa. I am really happy to be here. It's my first time in Japan, and I've heard Nuxt.js is quite popular in Japan. Can you raise your hand if you use Nuxt? Wow. Wow. Thank you. Okay. I will talk quickly about the Japan country. There is, I think this is one of the first websites I have seen, which is made with Nuxt.js. I didn't find so many websites, so if you build some website with Nuxt in Japan, please make a pull request on Awesome Nuxt repository, and I would love to see all the websites made with Nuxt in Japan. I also seen that there is a Nuxt.js book, and I think the author is in the room. So thank you for writing a book about Nuxt.js. I didn't have the time to write myself a book, and so I'm really happy that someone did. I would like to thank Inoue, which is he is actually the top contributor of the Nuxt.js documentation, and thanks to him you can learn Nuxt.js in Japanese. So thank you. Also on our website on Nuxt.js.org, Japan is the third country after China and USA. So I'm really happy to be here since you are one of the top 3 countries visiting Nuxt.js. And Wednesday, I had the honor to meet the Vue Japan user group and eat traditional Japanese food. And it was a great experience, and I'm really happy to be part of this amazing community. So my name is Sébastien Chopin. I'm the Nuxt.js creator with my brother at first. And you can find me on social network, on GitHub and Twitter. It's 18Nux. And I am the co-founder of Orion, which is my company with my brother. And we do Nuxt.js consulting and support. So it allows us to work quite full-time on Nuxt.js. This is actually the core team of Nuxt.js. So we are 6, and all across the world, I hope to have some Japanese contributor one day in the core team. And so about some statistic, we just reached 16,000 stars on GitHub. So it's a big milestone for us. We have 7 translations for Nuxt.js.org. and more than 1 million downloads on NPM. So let's have a quick introduction about Nuxt.js. I know that you are already using it, but since Nuxt 2.0, you can install Nuxt.js with npx, which is installed by default when you have the latest version of NPM. So when you do npx create Nuxt app, your project, it will ask you what server-side framework you want to use. So by default, you don't have to use any kind of framework because Nuxt.js uses Connect, which is the smallest server-side framework. But you can choose Express, Koa, Adonis, Happy, Feather, or Micro. And if you want to choose another framework, you can also, and you will use Nuxt.js as a middleware. We also support front-end framework as Bootstrap, Vueify, Bulma, Tailwind CSS, Element UI, and Purify. Then he will ask you some question. Some question is for the rendering mode. I will explain this in the next slide. And then he will ask you if you want to use the Axios module, which is a module that you will use to make HTTP requests. We highly recommend to use it when you want to do HTTP requests for security purpose. And then it's for your workflow if you want to use ESLint, Prettier, or using NPM versus Yarn. So about the rendering mode, before when we started to create Nuxt, it was for universal application only. But since then, we added more rendering support. So this is why now we say Nuxt is a Vue.js framework. So right now with Nuxt, you can have the universal mode, which is server-side rendering. You can also use static generated website with Nuxt that is using the universal mode to statically generate. So I will show you how it works. And you have the single page application mode, which is like the default Vue application that you will have when you create a normal Vue application. So about universal, how it works. You will simply run the Nuxt command and it will start a development server with server-side rendering. If you want to bundle your application for production, you will run Nuxt build. And if you want to start your production server with the production bundle, you will use Nuxt start. So how universal rendering works. We have a browser. We have the Nuxt.js server when you run Nuxt start or Nuxt dev. And let's say we have a REST API. The REST API is optional, but most of the time when you create a big application, you may use an API for dynamic content. So when a user go to your website made with Nuxt, it will request, there will be a request to your Nuxt.js server. Then maybe on this page, you will request your API that will probably send back some JSON. And then Nuxt.js will directly render the full page, the full HTML. So your user will see the full content of the page. There won't be any loader. But then it won't be interactable directly because the JavaScript won't be loaded. So what's happening then is, this is in Japanese.
It's downloading JavaScript.
Yeah, thank you. It's downloading the JavaScript, then it's parsing and executing the JavaScript. And what you have seen in this animation is when it's executing the JavaScript, we will use Vue to mount the application. So Vue in memory will regenerate the virtual DOM, and then it will patch it, it will mount it to the HTML that has been server rendered. And if everything matches, you will have a fully dynamic Vue application. And then when you will navigate, let's say I click on the blue block, maybe on this page you will also need to call your API because you are on a blog post, right, for instance. Your API sends back some JSON, and then you will have dynamically, like a single page application, the result of your page. So we have an example here which is Hacker News made with Nuxt.js. So let's see if I can click. Okay, so if I look at the source code here, as you can see, we have all the HTML that has been generated. And if I navigate, as you can see, it navigates only on client side. So you have the best of the two worlds, server-side rendering and then client-side navigation. So what is important to remember is, let's go back here. This request will happen only once per user, except if you manually refresh the page. Otherwise, it will be directly, when it will be navigating, it will be only doing this. You won't call your Nuxt.js server again. So about performances, you have to remember it's only one request per user and not every pages that will call your Nuxt.js server. So let's talk about static generated. In development, you will also run Nuxt because it's universal rendering. And then if you want to bundle and create your generated app, you will call Nuxt generate. And Nuxt generate will bundle your app, it will call Nuxt build, and then you will generate every route. So I will show you a demo after. And then you will create this dist folder that you can directly push to GitHub pages, for example, or any CDN. So this is how we look like. With Nuxt generate, you don't have any more a Nuxt server. So when the user requests your website, you will directly call, let's say, your CDN, for instance, GitHub page, and then you will directly send back the HTML plus JavaScript. And it will do the same thing as the universal rendering. And then when you will navigate, it will do exactly the same. So one difference between universal and static generated is when you have dynamic content, let's say you have e-commerce website and your listing, let's say it changed every 2 minutes because people order a lot, so you have some products that get out of stock and you have to regenerate the whole website because we can't keep track of the dependency of one product which is displayed on the pages. Depending on the website you have, we will recommend to use the universal rendering. And if it's, let's say, a portfolio or some website that doesn't change every day, we will recommend to use Nuxt.generate. And one thing important is if you need authentication, you can't use Nuxt.generate right now. We are trying to find a way that you can use session on Nuxt.generate. Lastly, we have the single page application. So if you don't care about server-side rendering, if you don't care about SEO, for example, you can use the same convention of Nuxt by using Nuxt-SPA, and it will directly create a dev server, but it will only bundle your application for the client side. And if you want to build it for production, you say Nuxt build --SPA. If you want to avoid saying --SPA, you can use the mode --SPA inside your Nuxt config.js file. But if you want to use only the command, you can do this. And like generate, it will create a dist folder that you can push to any CDN. And so this is really interesting to compare for the single page application. When your user will hit your website, he will make the request to your CDN, and the CDN will render the HTML plus JavaScript. But because it's not universal rendering, you may have a loader. You will have a loader until it will download the JavaScript and parse it and execute it. And when you will execute it, maybe you will need also to call this REST API. So for a product page, you will call the product API. And then when you get back the JSON, you can display the full page on single page app. And when you navigate, it's exactly the same as the other. It's only client-side navigation. So we have a demo as well, which is HN. I hope it's working. I forgot to load the server before, so then it was mostly on sleeping mode. So we can wait a little bit. Yeah. Well, the only difference is if you look at the source code here, you won't have all of this. You will only have this header part with the JavaScript, and then you will have only div with ID Nuxt and nothing inside. So of course for SEO you will lose the SEO part, or you will rely on Google crawling system. So okay, now it works. So when I navigate, it's like the same experience for the user. It works on client side. But if I look, this is the single page application. So if, like I say, if you need authentication like a back office and you don't care about SEO, we will recommend single page application. So with these three modes, you will always find a rendering mode that fits your need. So then, let's go back to our presentation. Okay. So for the pages component inside Nuxt are quite special since you have more attributes that you can use that that actually are helpers to help you make a universal application, but also helps your development to be faster. But before going inside all of this, I will talk a little bit about Nuxt V2 that was released a month and a half ago. So Nuxt V2 mostly changes are the support for Webpack 4 and Babel 7, which, yeah, that's normal. But what's interesting also is we have improvement of the CLI. We are now using Webpack bar, and we are really happy that also Next.js for React use Webpack bar as well as VuePress and other projects on the web that use Webpack. We have the debug mode, and we also have Consola, which has been released with the V2.0. So this you will see the difference in the next release of Next.js. Damn it. I think I forgot to add my notes on this. It's 34% faster on the first build, and 20, if I'm correct, 45% faster on hot module replacement when you... Yes? I can do Japanese. You now have more control about the code splitting that we do automatically. By default, we code split the pages, but from Nuxt 2.0, we don't code split the layouts for performances, but you can still control it with the build.splitchunk option that you can see inside the documentation. We have bundle isolation. This is mostly for security. So now we have, when we will bundle the application, you will have a .nuxt folder with inside a client folder and a server folder. So we avoid leaking any server information to the client. And we have Nuxt Start, which is a new module that you can use for production. We had this request because some people were using Docker and they didn't have to build their application inside their servers. So we have a runtime only modules that doesn't depend on Webpack that you can use for running Nuxt Start. So it will install faster. And one feature that we are really proud of is inside your pages you can use ES6 features, but because of Node.js that doesn't support ES module, you will have to use module.exports. But since Nuxt 2.0, inside nuxt.config.js, inside your server middleware and also inside your modules, inside Nuxt modules, you don't have to transpile them anymore because we will transpile them for you. So you can directly use the latest features in latest ECMAScript feature in these files. So I wanted to release Nuxt 2.3 yesterday, but it's not released yet. We are still working on making sure the documentation is up to date, the tests are all green, but it's coming in the next week, this is for sure, the next weeks. What's in Nuxt V2.3 is we have the modern build for the latest browser. Actually, we detect it automatically with the server-side rendering, so we directly give the right script depending on the browsers. We are also adding the support for Nuxt generate and Nuxt single-page application mode. So this will allow you to have smaller bundle if you want to target only latest browser. But we will also generate the legacy bundles for supporting other browsers. And we mostly worked on the refactoring of Nuxt internals. We now have the @nuxt org on NPM. So this is for the official module of the Nuxt core team. And we have @Nuxt.js. This is for the community. So if you want to create a module, and you can send the link to us, and if you guarantee that you will maintain it, you can directly have the @Nuxt.js org when installing. And this is actually the release note. It's still a draft. We are adding more and more. We will have Nuxt help command. We will have Nuxt CLI as well. So you will be able to install Nuxt CLI globally to run directly your Nuxt commands. And I don't want to say too much, but we may have a UI helper for Nuxt.js in development. This is different as Vue CLI, which is for scaffolding application. Nuxt UI will be for helping you during your development process of Nuxt.js and give you some hints of how you can improve your Nuxt application. So let's have a quick demo of Nuxt.js. So, okay. Okay, this is to, for instance, for Nuxt v2.3, so this is a branch that if you want to try, you can. But for instance, this is how it looks like for the new version. And we will also avoid clearing the console if you use Nuxt UI. So you will be able to work, for instance, with Adonis or Express, and Nuxt will not display any logs inside your console, so you will be able to focus on your API, for instance, and Nuxt logs will be directly redirected to the browsers in development. Because in development we have Webpack, and since Webpack is always rebuilding, it clears the console, which is not super a nice developer experience. So our main focus for Nuxt development is definitely improving the developer experience. Okay, let's focus on our demo now. So I will try to explain a bit the internal as well of Nuxt. Can everyone see the screen? Is it okay? Okay. So right now I have two pages. I will run yarn dev or npm run dev, which we'll call Nuxt. So this will be server-side rendering. So if I go to localhost 3000, I can navigate, and it's client-side navigation because we can see here client. So let's quickly look at our about page. So I have async data here that is checking some Nuxt.js internal, which is process.static, that let you know if you are inside a generated application. Process.server will tell you if it's actually server rendered, otherwise you know it's you on the client. So if I refresh here, I know I am on the server, and if I navigate, I know I'm on the client. Sorry. If I use npx nuxt --spa, what's happening now is we have only the client bundle, and if I refresh the page, as you can see, we have no more HTML, and we have only the rendering from client side. And if I use Nuxt generate, sorry, this will be in the next version of Nuxt that you will be able to use Nuxt directly as a command line. I am actually using npx. That's allow me to use the Nuxt command through the node modules. So here I have my bundle for production, and then I can see that it generated automatically my routes since they are static routes. And okay, now I have a dist folder with an index.html file and about folder with an index.html file inside. And if I serve this dist folder like GitHub page will do, or Surge or Now, and I go there, I have my page which is server rendered. Here we can see, and when I'm navigating, I can see that I have high from static directly, because of course it was my first condition here. So this is how you get these three differences, and this is how you can know in which rendering mode you are. So I'm sure most of you know this already. So if I create a user folder and I'm creating an underscore login.vue file, I will run yarn dev. And here I will display this. But my main concern is to show you this .nuxt folder. So when you want to debug a little bit your application, you can look at this .nuxt folder, because Nuxt is actually generating a Vue application for you. So you won't have to write all of these files. And if we look at the router, we can see that it automatically imported all these files as a lazy import. So you will code split automatically your pages when you will build for production. And then we will generate the router for you. And as you can see here, we also handle with an underscore the dynamic pages. So I know that I am on a dynamic page, so I can use async data here to get the data that I want. And here I have access to the context. The context, you can always know what's inside here. Inside the context, if you go to the API context, this is all the variables that you can get. And it will also tell you if it's only for the server side or client and server. So here I have the params. Let's say I return user, which is weird, but this is to show you how it looks like. So if I go to users, hello, so I have login, which is equals to hello, because actually the name of my file is underscore login, so login will be my parameters. So let's fetch the user from GitHub API for that. But for this I will need to make an HTTP request. So I will add this Axios module for that. So I can add yarn add at Nuxt.js/Axios. And when it's added, I can directly add it to my nuxt.config.js file. So modules in Nuxt.js are more powerful than plugins, since they can add middleware for you, they can add layout, they can add plugins as well, Vue plugins, and they can also inject themselves directly inside your Nuxt application. So by doing this, I can look quickly at the Axios documentation. Okay, I'm connected. If I go to usage, so when I add it to my nuxt.config.js, I can directly use Axios like this. I updated the documentation an hour ago, but it's not up to date. So this is even better now, since now you can directly use $Axios inside your async data method. So then I can say await. So we also added this method for Axios that will directly send back the data from the API. So you won't have to do something like this. And then I hope I have it somewhere. Okay, here, no, I will say, okay. I think it's something like this. And then I can directly send back the user. So let's try. Okay, it works directly. So here I have server-side rendering. Thank you. This is a basic feature. And I think I copied this Evanue login, which is hard to remember. I have it here. Okay, and I say Avenue profile. And then if I go back to my home page, and I can users. I can directly navigate, and it will also make the API request on client side. So async data will be called both on client side and server side. Sarah already covered the transition, but I want to show you how quickly we can have this. So by default, Nuxt will wrap your router link, your router view with the transition component. So if I add a CSS folder, let's call it assets, and then main.css, and then because I never remember, I will look at transition here and copy and paste. And okay, so I added this. I need to add this CSS key. Okay, so normally if I refresh and I'm navigating, yeah, we have transition directly, and it's working also with async data that it will wait for it to be finished before making the transition. So the point of Nuxt is trying to help you develop Vue.js application as fast as we can help you. And something that people often ask me is that I don't want to use the pages directory because my routes are too complex. And we actually have a router module for Nuxt. If you go to Nuxt community, this will become an official module. This is a module I created. And what you can do is you install it, so you add it then inside your Nuxt config. And it can also merge directly, so you can use both pages and a custom router. But by using these modules, you can remove the pages directory and use your own router.js with Vue router. So we are trying to be as modular as possible, so you can directly plug the features you want and you like and define your own behavior as well. So I don't have the time to cover all the features. It would take me, I think, one day. But I would like to thank everyone listening to this talk. I would like to thank the organizer, and I'm really happy to be in Japan this year, and I hope to be also here next year. And lastly, we have some Nuxt stickers, if you like stickers and magnets. So we have the Are You Nuxt stickers and magnets and the Nuxt logo that you can find right at the, forgot the name, at the door to the left, and you have the stickers. Thank you.